Hey, this is Tom from MVP Chess. Welcome back to my series on Bobby Fischer's seminal work, My 60 Memorable Games. In this video, we'll be analyzing game number 9 that Fischer played versus Walther in Zurich 1959. Before we jump into the analysis, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. You can subscribe to my channel by clicking the red subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Thanks so much for your support. I really appreciate it. Okay, Fischer with the black pieces. His opponent plays e4, best by test. And of course, Fischer responded with his favorite Sicilian. And after knight f3, d6, d4, open Sicilian on the board. Knight f6, knight c3. We have pawn to a6. Yeah, the Najdorf variation. Of course, Fischer played this almost exclusively throughout his entire career. Now, Fischer considered Walther to be a, quote, a minor European master. But credit to Walther, he didn't back down from a challenge, okay? Fischer was a master at the Najdorf, but he looked to bring the pain. He put bishop g5 on the board, which is by far the most testing variation against the Najdorf. And after e6, f4, later in his career, Fischer really liked to play queen b6 in this position, the so-called poison pawn variation. But it's incredibly complex, one of the sharpest positions there is in chess. Here, he decides to play bishop e7, a much more modest move. And after queen f3, Fischer notes in this position, it would be really important for black to play queen c7 here. Okay, to prevent this bishop from coming to c4. Fischer unfortunately plays knight bd7. You'll notice in Fischer's later games in these lines that he played queen c7 almost exclusively on move 8. But Walther misses his chance to develop the bishop to this really active c4 post and instead castles queenside, which enables Fischer to play queen c7 and correct his mistake. So Walther has to settle for the more modest d3 square for his bishop. Fischer plays b5. Okay, very thematic move in the structure, and it's a multi-purpose move. Okay, you're starting a potential queenside pawn storm against the enemy king. You're vacating the b7 square to fianchetto the light squared bishop, and you're also possibly preparing to castle the king to the queen side. So great move all around. Now, this starts a series of moves where both players almost have mutual chess blindness, okay? The clear plan for Fischer over the next 4 or 5 moves is to play b4, okay? This is a race position. Every tempo counts. Black needs to start counterplay ASAP, okay? Which is why Fischer thought it was really important in this position for white to play a3 himself. Okay, this would give white a hook on the queen side, but it would slow Fischer's attack down long enough so that white can get his counterplay going on the king side. But over the next several moves, both players don't really appreciate this plan. Both players perhaps don't think that b4 works or is possible, so they kind of ignore it. Bishop takes f6. Knight takes f6. Fischer notes here, and this is important for you Najdorf players. Okay, you gotta mind which piece you take with here. Okay, it looks nice to take with the bishop, putting it on this nice active diagonal, but there's a big time problem with the d6 pawn, and white can take advantage of that by sacrificing the bishop, taking back with the knight with tempo, and landing the pony on d6 with check. This would be a dumpster fire for black. So you must take with the knight in this position. Again, a3 is called for here. White plays rook e1. Again, b4 is called for here. Fischer plays bishop b7. Again, a3 is called for here. White plays king b1. And again, b4 is called for here, but Fischer instead plays rook c8. Okay, so Both players just missing this key idea in the position. And after g4, knight d7, g5, white's doing a nice job expanding on the king side. What does Fischer need to do? Of course, play b4. This is probably his last opportunity to play it. And unfortunately, he played knight b6 instead. Of course, b4 was called for. You have got to get counterplay going ASAP. And now, Walther, the minor European master, has just taken a massive initiative versus the mighty Fischer in his favorite Sicilian Najdorf variation. Okay, and Fischer is in massive trouble here. After f5, Fischer plays e5 to try to keep things closed. Notice, let's just put b4 on the board. Unfortunately, this is too little too late. White could just ignore this threat now, capture on e6. And if white sacrifices the piece, it's no big deal because he is just crashing in on these weakened light squares in black's position. Black can go ahead and resign here. Okay, so I think Fischer saw b4 at that moment, but realized his mistake, and that at this point it was just too late to do anything about it. And now white is just seeking to open lines, open files towards this black king who would love to be able to castle to the queen side, but unfortunately can't. It's either stuck in the middle or jumping right into the fire on the king side. So Fischer's in massive trouble here. We have an exchange on f6, and after bishop f8, knight d5, Fischer concludes in his annotations that black is busted here. Okay, but he didn't resign. He didn't give up. Okay, you know, we've heard of the so-called Magnus effect, the effect that Magnus Carlsen has on his competitors, you know, especially if they have a good or even winning position. How difficult it is psychologically to convert this advantage against a player of such high esteem. And as Emmanuel Oscar said, the hardest game to win is a one game. So Fischer correctly plays on. Knight takes d5, pawn takes d5, king d8. Fischer trying to do something with the king. Clearly, something has gone terribly wrong for him. His king is just walking about in the center of the board. And Walther finds a nice move in this position, knight c6, okay? This is a wise investment of this pawn, which Fischer wins, but the pawn is of little consequence in this position. It's much more important that Walther is opening central files and lines towards this enemy king. Bishop e4, queen b6. Walther begins just beating Fischer's pieces back, and now he's looking to just crash through on the f7 square. Fischer's king starts running for the hills. Queen takes f7, comes with check, and okay, Fischer's king has managed to find some security on the queen side, but it took him a lot of time. Walther has restored material equality, has a massive attack, and an incredibly dangerous pass pawn, just 2 squares away from promotion. Queen e6. Walther forms a battery on the light squares, also prepares to push this dangerous pawn. Queen c7, rook e3. In comes the rooks. Nice rook lift, perhaps looking to double on the d file or even swing this rook over to c3 or even a3 at a moment's notice. So really nice flexible move by Walther. Bishop h6, rook c3, queen b7, and f7. Wow. So Fischer is moments away from throwing in the towel and resigning the game. Okay, but he said, quote, that he wanted to play on and see what Walther would do. Okay, I think if Fischer were playing Petrosian, I think if Fischer were playing Carries, he would have resigned by now out of a sign of just respect and admiration that he had for those players. But unfortunately for Walther, he wasn't giving them that courtesy and was going to fight on. Bishop g7, rook c d3. Okay, Walter's got really nice pressure on the d file now, which he's able to exploit in this position. So I'll turn it over to you. White to move. After this move, Fischer says that, although you could argue white already has a decisive advantage now, but after white's next move, Fischer says that this should be decisive. So, what tactic did Walther find in this position to take advantage of this pressure that he's built up on the d file? Pause your videos. So congratulations if you found the really nice tactic queen takes e5. Okay, now Walter's up a pawn and he's got a lot of pressure on the d file. After takes, white momentarily sacrifices the queen, but of course he's going to be able to recoup the piece with interest. Fischer plays h5, and after this exchange and c3, let's take stock of this position. Walter's up a pawn. Okay, you could have argued that perhaps he could have gotten more out of the position, but I'm looking at the eval right now, and it really hasn't changed. It's reading about +5 for white, which is absolutely crushing. And it all has to do with this absolute monster pass pawn on f7. Okay. Now, after king c7, Fischer said if Walter put the move rook e8 on the board, he would have extended his hand, signed the score sheet, and resigned. Okay. But he said, I just wanted to see what my opponent was going to do. Okay. And that's really good advice from Fischer. Really good advice that you can use in your own games. So, did Walter play rook e8? No. He played rook a8. He erred. So, why was it important to play rook e8? We'll see. But it all has to do with limiting the activity of this king, particularly coming over and taking this dangerous pawn on f7. So Fischer immediately activates the king. Now, Walter still has the chance here to play rook e8, cutting off the king. And then he's got just a tailor-made plan of, oops, kings can't move like that, of just walking his king up to e4, and black will basically be in zugzwang. But he took on a6 instead, okay, which allowed Fischer's king to get active and capture this pawn on f7, okay? But Walter was banking on the fact that, hey, now I'm up 2 pawns as opposed to 1. But often in chess endings, okay, it very much has to do with the quality of your pawns, the quality of your pass pawns, and not necessarily the quantity of them. And Walter just gave up basically the highest quality pawn you can possibly get, a pawn that's one square, I should say, away from promotion. And after b4, so this was a nice move by Fischer, okay, kind of a minority attack against this queenside pawn island to try to create a weakness. The game was adjourned here. And Fischer notes in the book that he began to think, there might actually be some swindling prospects in this position. Now, why did he think that? Well, it all has to do with these bishops. These opposite colored bishops, okay? If the rooks come off, this could offer Fischer some nice drawing chances. And notice, what square is white's h-pawn promoting on? A dark square. What color bishop does he have? A light squared bishop. He has the wrong bishop. So Fischer knows if he can just manage to exchange off all of these queenside pawns, he's got a really good chance of drawing this position. And I think it's that detail that Walter failed to appreciate by playing rook a8 and getting a little materialistic grabbing pawns instead of playing rook e8 and cutting off Fischer's king. Okay. So after cb, bishop takes b4. Okay. White's got connected passers here, but Fischer's going to look to hopefully blockade and then destroy them. Okay. And then just get his king into the corner and try to draw the game. Of course, Rooks would also need to be exchanged in that position too. So a lot of work still to be done. Walther plays h3, just putting this pawn on the opposite color of Fischer's bishop. That's a nice defensive tactic to use in opposite colored bishop endings. King f6, rook b5, counterattacking here. Bishop d6, bishop e4, and rook e8. And this was a funny comment that Fischer gives in the annotations here. This was my first threat the entire game. It's a pretty primitive threat. But it's funny that Fischer acknowledges that this game has just been a train wreck so far, and he's been on the back foot since the opening. Rook f5, king g7, bishop f3, rook e1, king f2, and rook f1. So Fischer sets a nice trap for his opponent. Okay, this rook is really short on squares. Okay, so after, let's say, a4 in this position, Fischer actually has a perpetual here. Okay, the king actually needs to shuffle back and forth, because Fischer points out if king b3 in this position, king g6 would potentially pick up a piece. This ending right here would be drawn. Apologies. So rook d5, Walther sidesteps that threat and counterattacks the bishop. Rook f2, and Walther offers the exchange of rooks. So phase one accomplished for Fischer. Now he still has a long way to go to salvage the half point, but he's managed to exchange off the rooks. He's left with an opposite colored bishop ending, okay? And all he needs to do is trade this bishop for these two pawns, and this game will be drawn. So, of course, first, this pawn on h5 is on prise. Fischer fixes it on a dark square. Now he doesn't have to worry about it. King d3, king f6, king c4, king e7, king b5, king d7. Okay, so again, this is the basic plan that I've drawn out here. This bishop for these two pawns and parking the king on h8 will secure Fischer the draw. a4, okay. So Fischer looking to take advantage of that move and the kind of weaknesses it's created on the dark squares. Fischer's going to look to blockade here. b4, king b8. Okay, so Fischer's king finds a nice post on a7 and is now rerouting the bishop to attack these pawns from the rear. So we have some maneuvering here. Fischer's just waiting. And here's a good illustration of why Fischer's defense is so good here. Okay, if white plays the natural move b6, you got a 2-on-0 majority. Let's advance it. Not so fast. Bishop takes b6. And after this capture, notice the position of the kings. Fischer's going to be able to walk his king all the way to h8. And again, white has the wrong colored bishop to secure the h-pawn's promotion. This would be a draw. Okay, so that's why white cannot push here. So Fischer just waits, provokes the pawn forward. Okay, now this pawn on a5 is on prise. Walther has to protect it. And after king c6, bishop b5, king c5, Fischer's just waiting here. Bishop e8 and bishop e1. The players agreed to a draw in this position. Wow, what a save by Fischer. He was a move away from just resigning the game and managed to fight on and draw here. So, why did they agree to a draw? Well, in this position, the only way for white to really make progress is to push this pawn to b7. Okay, but then after bishop g3, taking control over the promotion square, which, by the way, is actually notated in my 60 as bishop f4. So that was a typo I actually found in reviewing this game. Bishop g3, okay, taking control of the promotion square, a6, and king b6. Fischer just has the dark squares totally blockaded and locked down. and there's absolutely nothing white can do to break this blockade. And notice this pawn on h4 is as safe as can be, protected by the bishop. Wow. So, great game by Fischer. He showed great resiliency. You know, he found himself in a completely losing position, but kept his nerve, fought on, and gave us a really model game in how to draw in opposite colored bishop endings, even when we're down 2 pawns and 2 connected pass pawns at that. Okay? So don't give up in your chess games. There are a lot of ways to salvage a half point, so play on. Keep fighting like Fischer does. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't done already. You can do so by clicking the red subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you for game number 10. Take care.